Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Nice to be back with you all again. And in case you didn't know, we're reading from Canto 10, Chapter 14. Very wonderful chapter. Prayers by Lord Brahma. In this chapter, there's some very celebrated verses, often quoted verses. Largely that was in the first 30 verses that set the beginning of his prayers. Brahma is describing the process of bhakti and Sambandha Gyan. Sambandha Gyan means knowledge of the relationship of all things with Krishna. And he covers all things is a lot of things. He covers big territory. And then, starting with verse 31, we're now on verse 34. But starting with verse 31, Vishwanath says he takes a plunge in the ocean of Madhurya, the sweetness of Krishna's pastimes, because the fullness of Krishna includes everything, and everything includes not only opulences, but sweetness. In Vaikuntha, predominating is opulence. And in Vrindavan, there's all the opulence plus sweetness. And there's degrees of sweetness, and so he's appreciating he who is the source of all the Vedas and knows everything that the Vedas know. He's expressing what his experience has been like, being in Vrindavan and seeing what he's seen and experiencing what he's experienced. The first two verses, 31, 32, they're he's just expressing his amazement at the good fortune, first of the mothers and the cows, who for 1 month experienced giving their milk directly to Krishna, because Krishna took the form of all the cowherd boys and all the calves, because the mothers and the cows desired to have Krishna as their son or as their calf, so he fulfilled their desire. Voila. He became their son, and he was taking their milk directly to his full satisfaction and to theirs. How fortunate. And then he describes, text 32, the fortune of Nanda and the cowherd men, and then expanded to all the residents of Vrindavan, because they have this relationship with Krishna of Maitri in a very broad and generic sense, a friendly, intimate, friendly relationship with Krishna. So much, though, that there's a very strong degree of spiritual sense of possessiveness, that Krishna is everything to me. And Krishna feels like that towards them, because they feel like that towards him. So they're the great fortune of all the residents of Vrindavan. That's 32. 33, we're on 34. 33, we spent a lot of time discussing from the good fortune of the residents of Vrindavan, who with their senses they're directly experiencing the Transcendental Lord, which is different than simply meditation. or knowledge, the mind and the intelligence, they have spiritual bodies, and with their spiritual bodies, they're experiencing through their spiritual senses the spiritual form of Krishna, and they're being very merciful to us, the controlling deities of the senses, so that we can also, at least to a smaller degree, but to some degree, experience the sweetness, this madhurya, the honey-like nature of Krishna and Krishna's form, etc. We'll get to 34 in a minute, but I wanted to spend a little bit of time from another perspective, repeating something that we heard with verse 33. With verse 33, we heard, it's kind of a new topic. If you listen carefully, you'll catch it. Along with the senses and the objects of the senses, there's controlling deities of the senses. Without the controlling deities of the senses can't function. In the creation of the universe, even the demigods are there with the senses and the sense objects, and nothing happens, because they are dependent upon Vasudeva. When Vasudeva enters, then the universal form arises as if it was asleep and now becomes awake and starts to do its thing. And then we also heard those controlling deities, listen carefully, they're deriving their power to control the senses in this creation from their counterparts in the spiritual realm. I'll say it again. There's a spiritual aspect of each of these forms of the controlling deities in the spiritual world. And the controlling deities of each universe, and there's so many universes, they're deriving their power from the controlling deities in the spiritual realm. For those who have spiritual senses, like the Brajbasis, their senses are not dependent upon the material demigods. But there's spiritual forms of these personalities, the controlling deities of the material senses. There's their spiritual counterpart in the spiritual realm. It's maybe not too much of a surprise. We just don't hear so much about it. Basically, it's whatever so below, as above, so below. You know that one, right? Whatever is here, there's a spiritual reality. This is a reflection of the spiritual reality. So controlling deities have their spiritual reality. And they're dependent. The demigods are not independent, they're dependent. And they're dependent upon the controllers from whom they derive their power to control. Say it negatively. If their power to control is withdrawn, they can't control. Just like us, our senses, our power of locomotion or power of hearing or seeing or smelling, just like one of the things with COVID, your power of smelling goes. Right? The controlling deities are spanking you. So anyway, there's a way, there's the material way, and then there's the higher way, and then there's the higher way, and then there's the highest way. Krishna's the source of everything. Similarly, listen carefully. The purpose. What's the purpose of the Vedas from Bhagavad Gita 15:15? What's the purpose of the Vedas? To know Krishna. So, what's the purpose? Karma Kanda section of the Vedas. What's the purpose of the Karma Kanda section of Vedas? One way to say is it's elevating one's activity to bring it closer to a position of transcendence, closer to goodness, closer to transcendence, to know Krishna. But you can only know Krishna through bhakti. So listen to this. This is Bharat Maharaj Canto 5, Chapter 7, Text 6, 5.7.6. Bharat Maharaj, like many personalities, was performing Vedic yajnas. But when he was performing Vedic yajnas and invoking names of the devatas to whom the yajnas were being propitiated or offered, he was understanding it's not the devatas, it's the personalities in the spiritual world that are being worshipped. You follow? Here's the text. After performing the preliminaries of various sacrifices, Maharaj Bharat offered the results in the name of religion to the Supreme Personality Godhead Vasudeva. In other words, he performed all the yajnas for the satisfaction of Lord Vasudeva Krishna. Bhoktaram Yagatapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram Suradam Sarvabhutanam. Last verse of chapter 5 Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna said, Prabhupada calls it the peace formula. Krishna is the bhokta of all yajnas. But not only you invoke his name at the beginning and then you invoke everybody else's name so they can take part and get some benefit too. In the beginning, in the middle, and the end, according to Bharat Maharaj, Lord Vasudeva, the personality of Godhead, is being invoked and satisfied. Maharaj Bharat thought that since the demigods were different parts of Vasudeva's body, he controls those who are explained in the Vedic mantras. By thinking in this way, Maharaj Bharat was freed from all material contamination, such as attachment, lust, and greed. When the priests were about to offer the sacrificial ingredients into the fire, Maharaj Bharat expertly understood how the offerings made to different demigods was simply an offering to the different limbs of the Lord. For instance, Indra is the arm of the Supreme Personality Godhead, and Surya, the sun, is his eye. These are controlling deities of limbs, of senses. The sense of sight, controlling deity is the sun. And so forth. This is back to text 33. There's controlling deities of our senses with physical bodies, and they're deriving their strength from those who are in the spiritual realm, controlling them. Thus, Maharaj Bharat considered that the oblations offered to different demigods were actually offered unto different limbs of Lord Vasudeva. And some of you may be a little familiar with Vishnu Sahasranam. Vishnu Sahasranam is a set of prayers where 1,000 names of Vishnu. There are Vaishnavas that recite them daily or regularly. Vishnu Sahasranam. And if you look at some of those names, there's names of demigods. But the names of the demigods are derived from where? They're derived from Krishna or Vishnu. Because their ability to do this or that or the other thing comes from Vishnu. Because he's the source of everything. He's the source of whatever they do. So in Vishnu Sahasranam, when speaking those names, like Shiva is one of the 1,000 names. But it's not referring to Lord Shiva. Or Lord Shiva is manifesting a portion of the totality of the personality of Godhead. And so forth. In this way, the purpose of the Vedas is to know Krishna. So those that don't have that understanding, don't have that consciousness, or don't even have the desire, these other things are there, karma kanda and jnana kanda, for persons who don't want the fullness of the absolute truth. But indirectly they're getting it, and those that directly can understand it, like verse 33, Brahma gets it. He's one of the controlling deities of in his case, it's the intelligence. So there's 5 and 5. 5 knowledge-acquiring senses, 5 working senses. 5 and 5 is 10. Then mind, intelligence, and false ego makes another 3. That makes 13. In this description, 2 are discounted. The 2 are the organ of evacuation and the genitals. Because they're vulgar, they're not included in the 13 reduces to 11. So those 11 experience Krishna directly by the mercy of the Vrajavasis, who are not controlled by the controlling demigods, but they're controlled by Vasudeva and his spiritual realm expansions. And I did a little research. In Krishna Sandarbha, Sandarbhas? Yes? Yes? No? No. The Srimad Bhagavatam, yes? Yes. Srimad Bhagavatam has, one of the commentaries of Srimad Bhagavatam was written by Jiva Goswami, and it's in 6 parts. Each one of those are Sandarbhas, and one of the Sandarbhas is Krishna Sandarbha, and it's explaining the uniqueness of the form of Bhagavan, because the previous Sandarbha is Bhagavat, but amongst all those who are Bhagavan, Krishna is the supreme superlative, so it's Krishna Sandarbha. In Krishna Sandarbha, text 88 and 89, Jiva Goswami writes, the spiritual demigods who protect the Goloka planet are described in the Rig Veda. 10:90:16. Quote, many eternally perfect and glorious demigods protect the spiritual world. So there are demigods that are protectors of the material, and there are spiritual demigods that are protectors of the spiritual realm. And then text 89. This is a quote from Padma Purana. These protectors of the Goloka planet are also described in the following verse from the Maha Vaikuntha Varnana in the Uttarakhand of Padma Purana. Many eternally perfect, glorious, and handsome demigods serve that spiritual planet, Padma Purana. In our discussion on verse 33, in addition to the 11 devatas, I'm forgetting which of the senses it's controlled. Which sense is controlled by the Digpals? The Digpals are devatas who are protectors of the 10 directions. Pala means protect. Palana Shakti is the potency that Prithu Maharaj was empowered by the Supreme Lord to rule. We're okay? Are we okay? Okay. Okay. That's it? Okay. One of the categories of incarnations, there's 6. One of them is empowered incarnations, or Shakti Vesha Avatar. So Prithu is one of them. Prithu is carrying the fullness, or invested with the fullness of the Lord's ruling potency, or Palana Shakti. So the Digpalas, they protect this created realm, and they protect the spiritual realm. It's described in Brahma Samhita. There's 10 Digpals. They have tridents to keep unqualified people from entering. And you can read it to text 7 from Brahma Samhita, and it describes them. So they're in the spiritual world, and they're one of the sets of controlling deities that control the senses. but they're in the spiritual world too. As above, so below. This is just adding to the concept was a little bit new to me. I wasn't accustomed to hearing that. Prabhupada didn't speak so much about it, but it's unpacking what Brahma's prayer number 33, text 33. There's other scriptural references that support the idea that in the spiritual realm, there's these controlling personalities along with the material realm. Okay. And then 34 was Brahma praying. I can read the verse, but he is praying to Krishna. These residents of Vrindavan are so exalted, I don't feel qualified to request that I may become also a cowherd person. That would be too bold. But what I would like to do is take birth somewhere in Vrindavan. And if not in Vrindavan, just outside Vrindavan, so some of the dust from the feet of those residents of Vrindavan can touch my head, because it's by getting their favor that I can become one like them. It's really nice. It's, we don't go directly to Krishna and say, I want this rasa, please. That's not how one gets the favor of one who has such love for Krishna in a particular rasa, in a particular mood of love. That's how it happens. So Brahma is praying in that way. Let me get some of the dust from the feet of some of these residents of Vrindavan. And in one sense, it's like super humility, because who is Brahma? He's the smartest person in the universe. Not just like, the best in his graduating class in school or something. He's the smartest person in the universe since forever. And he is the controller of the universe, or he's the creator and oversees the universe that he creates. When the demigods have a problem, they go to him. He's number one guy, personality. And he is wanting dust from the feet of these residents of Vrindavan, so that he can become qualified like they're qualified. By their mercy, he can become like them. That's 34. Now is 35. It's really nice. Really nice. With really very elevated verses, prayers. Text 35 translation. My mind becomes bewildered, just trying to think of what reward other than you could be found anywhere. You are the embodiment of all benedictions which you bestow upon these residents of the cowherd community of Vrindavan. You have already arranged to give yourself to Putana and her family members in exchange for her disguising herself as a devotee. So what is left for you to give these devotees of Vrindavan, with whose homes, wealth, friends, dear relations, bodies, children, and very lives and hearts are all dedicated only to you? Now, this is plunging in the ocean of sweetness, or Madhurya. This Vrindavan place and the residents of Vrindavan are most amazing. So it's beyond the opulence, it's into the sweetness of Krishna. And my mind becomes bewildered just trying to think of what reward other than you could be found anywhere. I came across something today that it relates, and I think I'll share it with you. it's again Jiva Goswami. Jiva Goswami wrote in addition to writing the Sandarbhas, he wrote commentaries on Brahma Samhita and Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Now, what's Brahma Samhita? Brahma Samhita is a Sanskrit text that's Brahma's, it's one of 100 chapters that is describing the totality of knowledge of everything from Brahma's perspective. And we have one of those 100. That's our Brahma Samhita. Brahma Samhita. And it was in Sanskrit. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu found it. And he had a copy made. There were no printing presses. He had a copy made. And then he began distributing copies amongst his followers. The very first one to receive a copy was Ramananda Roy, and then when he got back to Jagannath Puri, because he found it all the way in South India. A very, very, very far away temple in South India, Adi Keshava temple, way south. When he got back to Puri, so the devotees came to understand Lord Chaitanya accepts this is authorized. It's Srimad Bhagavatam in a nutshell. The topics are very compressed and sutra-like, but everything is there. So, Jiva Goswami made a commentary on Brahma Sutra. Brahma Samhita. And in the beginning of that commentary, he writes the same thing that he wrote at the beginning of the commentary of Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. That's an invocation verse. And I'm going to say that invocation verse. Sanatana samoyasya jayan shriman sanatanaha Shri Bhalabho nuja so sao Shri Ropo jiva sadgatihi. This is the translation. This is its invocation. He whose elder brother named Sanatana is equivalent to Sanatana. He whose younger brother is named Sri Vallabha, because there were three brothers, Sanatana Goswami, Rupa Goswami, and Sri Vallabha, who was also known as Anupam. So Sanatana, he whose younger brother is named Sri Vallabha, that Rupa Goswami is the auspicious shelter of Jiva. So Sanatana was his elder brother. Anupam or Sri Vallabha was his younger brother. It's a prayer to Rupa Goswami. He's a Rupanuga, Jiva Goswami. That Rupa Goswami is the auspicious shelter of Jiva himself, or all Jivas. So that's his invocation verse. So question. The first line says, he whose elder brother named Sri Sanatana is equivalent to Sanatana. So how to understand what that means? So here's two explanations. There's three. One explanation, Sanatana means the Supreme Lord. Just like in Vishnu Sahasranam. Shiva means the Supreme Lord. Sanatana means the Supreme Lord. There's another explanation that some who have translated that verse of Jiva Goswami in the invocation verse, Sanatana refers to one of the four Kumaras. And to support that translation or the meaning, there's a verse in Gora Gondadesh Dipika. Gondadesh Dipika is a who's who. Written by Kavi Karnapur, and those who are in Gora Lila, who are they in Krishna Lila? Lord Chaitanya is Radha Krishna, and Nityananda is Balaram. But it's not just those two, it's everybody. Everybody in Gora Lila have their spiritual counterpart in Krishna Lila. So in Gora Lila, Sanatana is one. So in Gauragunda Teshtapika, it says Sanatana Goswami in Gaura Lila is one of the 4 Kumaras named Sanandana amongst the 4 Kumaras. He uses the phrase Sanatana Muni. Sanatana Goswami is Sanatana. So that's one rendering of this invocation verse. But then, this, I hope you appreciate the poetry. There's another verse that comes from Valmiki Ramayana. And in Valmiki Ramayana, one of the things that's beautiful about Valmiki Ramayana is it's very poetic. There are literary ornaments called alankar. They're just like figures of speech that make it really nice. And one of those alankaras in Valmiki Ramayana, and other places too, it's called Anandavaya, which means an ornament of self-comparison. An example of that in Valmiki Ramayana that's used by our acharyas when explaining things. Gaganam, Gaganakaram. The sky is as vast as the sky. Sagara, Sagaro Pamaha. The ocean is as deep as the ocean. Rama, Ravanayor, Yudham, the war of Rama and Ravana. Rama, Ravanayor Iva, is as fierce as the war of Rama and Ravana. There's nothing, you can't compare it to anything. So you say the sky is as vast as the sky, the ocean is as deep as the ocean. The war of Ram and Ravana was as fierce as the war of Ram and Ravana. You can't compare it to anything else. It's a literary device or literary ornament, an alankara. It's got a name. The name is Anandvaya. You compare this thing to itself because you can't compare it to anything else. So Jiva Goswami is saying Sanatana, you can't compare him to anybody else. Sanatana is Sanatana. And the younger brother, he's Sri Vallabha. Or that's and then Rupa, because Rupa is the one he's honoring, is the shelter of Jiva. So it's glorification of Rupa Goswami. Because when Jiva Goswami went to Vrindavan, he was very young, and he was placed in the care of Rupa Goswami, who gave him Diksha and gave him Shiksha. He trained him thoroughly in the teachings of Lord Chaitanya with everything. The Bhagavatam and Rasa, Bhakti Rasamrita. He taught him everything. Gaudiya teachings thoroughly, and he was the sponge. He received it all, so he has the highest regard. So Rupa is the shelter of Jiva. Sanatana is Sanatana, and Sri Vallabha, the younger brother is Sri Vallabha, and I offer my respects to them. So similarly, that's like what's being said here by Brahma. What can you... My mind becomes bewildered just trying to think of what reward other than you could be found anywhere. Krishna says something similar to the gopis, isn't it? How can I repay you? You just have to be satisfied with the love that you have. Because he gave himself, they gave themselves fully to him. He gave himself fully to, I can't give you anything more than give myself. Or Ram says something similar to Hanuman. I can't repay you, so all I can do is embrace you. What does Hanuman want more than that? There isn't something more than that. Oh. That's what Brahma is saying to Krishna. Look, to Putana, what did you reward Putana? She dressed herself like a devotee in disguise. And then, because of her, you also delivered her family members. She had a brother, two brothers, Agha and Baka. He delivered them too. Because Putana dressed like a devotee. So what are you going to do for these residents of Vrindavan? They've given themselves to you completely, and you've given yourself to them completely. What more can you do? Vishwanath says he can't. Okay, so now we're just going to read one commentary and we'll close for this evening. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes, quote, "Perhaps you do not want to say, if I can attain the dust of the feet of the inhabitants of Braja." That was the previous prayer. But please answer one other thing that I'm now asking. What reward can you give to the inhabitants of Braja? This is the question I ask you. Krishna's reply, Brahma, though you are knowledgeable of the meaning of the Vedas, you cannot understand the answer? Brahma, our minds, not only mine, but those of Shiva, the Kumaras, and others, are bewildered about this. What is the state of our minds? Our minds have become bewildered just trying to think of what type of reward you would give them from anywhere or any time, as you are the final reward of all, Vishvapala. And you have already given yourself the final reward as their son since eternity. But if there is some other thing you have worthy of giving, you should give it to them. But there is nothing else you could give them, since you have given yourself already. Thus our minds are bewildered. Krishna, oh Brahma, you are really ignorant of the truth. Knowing they would manifest such astonishing spontaneous devotion, I have in advance given myself to them as their son. They are satisfied with this. I am knowledgeable about what to do in the future. In this way, I have defeated you. Brahma, oh Krishna, if you talk like this is how I will answer. You are certainly doing what is proper. But though Putana was sinful, just by imitating a devotee, she and all her family attained you personally. But the inhabitants of Braja, who gave up all attachments, such as house, wealth, friends, objects, body, mind, for you out of great affection, also attained you. The same body that you have given to the low, sinful Putana, you also gave to the most exalted, jewel-like inhabitants of Braja. This is, in essence, highly improper. Acceptance of your indebtedness to them is your atonement. Now, Brahma's not speaking like that, but that's our acharyas. That's their Vishwanath in particular, we mentioned in the morning class. He is a Rasika Bhakta. See, he doesn't mind saying things that are a little sassy or spontaneous loving expression. That when there's intimacy of love, one can express oneself in ways that person that isn't part of that intimate relation, they don't understand what's going on. And it's not insulting. It's intimacy. It's something like the intimacy of Radha and her gopi friends in their dealings with Krishna when they're called the left-wing gopis. And they say, startling things to Krishna. And and Krishna says startling things to them. And then they quarrel, and it's like, whoa, wait a minute. That's not nice. We just recently conducted Govardhan Parikrama, and it's now a rerun is being requested by devotees in Singapore. So we're going to do it during the Chinese New Year coming up, February 12th, and that weekend. But with the tax pastime, it's reading the detail is really funny, because they say really insulting things to each other. But when Krishna stops the gopis, first what happens? Who is this? And the verses written by Raghunath Das Goswami where he says, "Is this lightning? No, this person is standing still, and lightning is always moving. It's totally luminous, but then after lightning flashes, it subsides. But this creature, this entity, is fully effulgent all the time. Is it this? Is it that?" So it's then then she says like that about Krishna, some glorifications, but then challenging. You're coming by here all the time with all your milk products. You don't pay any taxes. You got to pay taxes. I won't let you pass. Anyway, who are you? This is Radha. She's the queen of Braja. Take a hike, Buster. You don't use that kind of language, but so there's back and forth where it's really sassy. He says something insulting. They say something insulting, but it's not material kind of argumentation. It's loving exchange, and Krishna loves it, and they love it. And then it turns funny, and then it turns this, and then it turns that. It's just an ocean of rasa that is like waves that rise and then subside, and then other waves rise, and then some of those smaller waves, and it's an ocean of rasa. And then there's Chandravali that, the spiritual world is, it's a place it's an ocean of rasa. That's Rupa Goswami's realization and teaching. The spiritual world is an ocean of rasa, and rasa has, oceans have waves, and rasa has waves. And this wave, that wave. So, Brahma isn't speaking like Vishwanath is saying he's speaking, but he's speaking in a rasika way. The same body that you have given to the low, sinful Putana, you also gave to the most exalted, jewel-like inhabitants of Braja. This is, in essence, improper acceptance of your indebtedness to them as your atonement. Wow. He's left wing. So let's see if there's some discussion. Tomorrow morning we'll continue with verse 35. It's a little different than those first 30 verses. The first 30 verses were so much philosophy. It was tough going. So let's see. We have the microphone ready for whoever wants to use it.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
I have two questions.
Okay.
So the first one was about the demigods that you were talking about, which rule the material senses.
Okay.
And you mentioned that as above, so below. So
what?
You mentioned as above, so below.
Ah, yes.
So I didn't quite follow that. That's because when we think of ourselves, we are also essentially supposed to be spiritual beings, but we have come down to this material plane because of a lot of karma and everything. We are still stuck here, right?
Yeah.
So if these demigods are supposed to be purer than us, how are they in the material plane? And
How are they what?
how are they in this material plane along with us? And how
they're
are
just
they?
more elevated.
But if they're elevated, why are they on Earth? Because I thought Earth was a place for people.
They're not on Earth. They're overseeing those on Earth. They're empowering those on Earth.
So who is that spiritual connection that they have in the spiritual realm?
Okay,
then?
let's do the so above, so below. The chapter of Bhagavad Gita that begins, the tree with the branches down and the roots up,
Right.
means it's a reflection of the spiritual realm. And the connection, the roots, go up to the spiritual realm. And the branches go down. That's the reflection when you go to that example, the bank of a lake or a pond. In the reflection, it's upside down.
Right.
So, and the extension of that is what exists here, or in the created realm, is just a reflection of the spiritual realm. That's the as above, so below. That's what that phrase means. So the above is everything that's here has its counterpart in the spiritual realm. This is a reflection of that. So there are demigods here. They're not on the Earth planet, other than when they used to come and visit. In Sadhuputa's language, they're quarantined during Kali Yuga. That was before there was this epidemic, by the way. But they just don't come because it's Kali Yuga. But prior to Kali Yuga, they would come. They wouldn't live here,
Right.
but they could travel. However, they have their vimanas, and they would sometimes come and receive offerings and do different things, and give benedictions, and so they don't live here. They're in a higher realm, in the vertical dimension of the universe. It's Swarga.
Right.
That's where they live. But they can go up. They can go up. They can go to
Brahmaloka.
the place where Vishnu resides. It's Sweta Dweep. They can come down. They can stay. They're mobile. So what their function in the universe is, maintaining the universe. And one of the maintenances of the universe, one of them, is controlling the senses of all living entities, not just humans, all embodied living entities. And they derive their power to do that from the source of everything, from above. Now, is that clear, or is that still a question?
No, I got it. I think I was understanding it the wrong way, so that
Okay.
makes it clear. Thank you.
Okay.
The second question I had was in verse 1034, you mentioned that Brahma says that he wants to actually take the dust of the Rajavasi so that he can experience that same devotion to Krishna.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? Because
Yeah. It's a nice topic. He's specifically speaking of dust, but leave the dust part out and just say, getting the mercy of. Those who are elevated above us, we should look to those who are elevated above us and appeal to their mercy. And their nature is merciful, but if we appeal for their mercy, that means our hearts are open for the mercy they're more than willing to extend. He's speaking specifically now of Braja itself, and Braja has dust. And he wants the dust of the feet of the residents of Vrindavan. And to get it, he could ask them, can I have some dust from your feet? But, they'd be embarrassed. He's Brahma. What are you asking? So let me just get the dust, the mercy, from those who are receiving the mercy of Krishna, like nobody else is receiving the mercy of Krishna. Let me get their mercy, the dust from their feet. Just by, in my next birth, before I was seeking liberation, specifically, before I was seeking liberation, I've got knowledge, like mucho. And I've in charge of the universe. I created it. I have to rebuild half of it every morning. And I know the universe inside and out. Knowledge, creative potency. I want liberation. I'm just leaving all of that behind, because look at this. This is way above all that. It's a teaching for Vaishnavas. Don't aspire for knowledge. Don't aspire for power. Don't aspire for liberation. Then what's left? Aspire for something. The mercy of these exalted personalities who have such love for Krishna. I want that. That's a transcendental aspiration. The others are not as transcendental.
So the transcendental aspiration is to appeal for the mercy of a devotee of Krishna rather than appeal to Krishna himself.
Yes.
There is a difference between the two.
Yes, exactly. That's a very important part of it. But another very important part of it is what's really worthy of aspiration. Mm-hmm. Knowledge?
No.
Power? Liberation? Those are things that people really want,
Yeah.
Like Dhruva, he wanted power, he wanted a kingdom. So, anyway. His mother, because we just did this, Dhruva's mother said, Lord Brahma, he got all of what he got by unalloyed worship of Vishnu. So follow him. That's your great-grandfather, your grandfather. He's, Swayambhuva Manu. He, sacrifices, pleasing the Lord. He got his position and liberation by pleasing the personality. So follow that path. You want a kingdom? You get more than a kingdom. Follow that path. So that's the Dhruva way of Maharaj pastime saying. And here's the Brahma's prayers saying. Bhagavatam is teaching us what's really, really the worthy goal. Now, the other part is to reach that worthy goal, you need the mercy of those who have reached that goal. You can't just bypass them. You won't get there that way.
So when we say, for me, if it's a practical application and to say that if I have to appeal, does that mean actually following a Guru Parampara?
Yes.
And going with the initiation process? That would be the definition of appealing to a devoted to.
Yes, and it's embedded in the topics of the Bhagavatam. 10.14.3. It says it in a nutshell. Dedication of oneself to these topics. Stay in your position. Practical application. Sta nes tatat. Stay in your position. Whatever that is. You and each of us, whatever that is. We have our nature, we have our duties, and we have our responsibilities. And you just keep those. And simultaneously dedicate yourself to these topics. By dedication to these topics, which is what we're doing right now, it's elevating. I don't change what I'm doing. I change the consciousness behind what I'm doing that says, I need the mercy of these elevated souls. That's my aspiration. And it takes a while for that to get nurtured, like a seed that sprouts. But when it sprouts, that becomes the center of your life. Right. While you're living your life in a responsible manner.
Right.
Motherly duties and household duties and occupational duties and all your duties. That's the frame, and then inside is the bhakti. And the bhakti that you cultivate is what you said, Guru Parampara. But these topics are the essence. For our Guru Parampara, the Srimad Bhagavatam is it. That's our principal source of awakening of spiritual consciousness through Srimad Bhagavatam. Shruti, Praman. It tells us turn left or right. How to conduct our affairs.
Right.
With this right spirit, or the right mood of love, and then the do's and the don't, the cultural nuances.
Right.
It's all there.
So there was another, when you were giving the example of the gopis too, right? There were left-wing gopis and right-wing gopis and their interaction. And also when you mentioned about Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur.
About the which?
About Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, I think, did I get that right?
Vishwanath Chakravarti.
Chakravarti Thakur, the language with which he gave that explanation, those are their personal rasas, or the rasa that has developed from their bhakti.
Yes,
my
exactly.
Struggle and my maybe it's a immature question, honestly. When we are on this path, how do we identify what that rasa is?
It'll come in due course of time. Here's a bag of marigold seeds. Now, is this one yellow or orange?
I don't know.
Let it grow, and you'll find out is it yellow or orange. Is it going to be one of those small blossoms or medium blossoms or the big ones? Mm-hmm. Let it grow, and you'll find out. It is what it is. That's what it is. Our rasa is what it is. We'll find out as it matures.
So the reason for this question is not to put Vibhu Prabhuji in a spot, but one of the questions or discussion topics during our group discussion was, how is it that we can serve Krishna better and not just take it, right? And that got me thinking on, doesn't it also have to be based on how your rasa develops? Or
that's in the more mature stage, yes. But for now, you and me and the rest of us, service. Mm-hmm. Without a mix of motivation. Stay there. Develop that. Because you're not going to get to the higher without that. Mm-hmm. And we're not there yet, so you do that. Service without motivation. Mm-hmm. Or go down a little bit. Mm-hmm. Become a human being.
That's probably a little bit difficult sometimes.
Here's a really nice, at the end, let's see, the end of the Prahlad Maharaj, if you read Bhagavatam, it's all there. At the end of the whole Prahlad Maharaj story, mm-hmm. That's Canto 7, Chapter 10, it ends his prayers. Mm-hmm. And Chapter 11, it begins. Maharaj Yudhishthira, the whole Chapter 7 is Narada speaking to Yudhishthira mm-hmm. at the Rajasuya Yagya, and Krishna seated there, listening to the whole thing. Narada speaking. Yudhishthira goes, wow, Prahlad was pure devotee. I'm supposed to become the king, Rajasuya Yagya. Can you tell me how I can help the citizens get there to where Prahlad was? Because that's my duty, right?
Right.
And I'm paraphrasing, of course. Narada goes, very good question, very good question. You have to follow Varnashram to get to the stage of pure bhakti. But to follow Varnashram, you have to be a human being.
Correct.
And here's the characteristics of a human being. Now, which comes first, being a human being or following, and then following Varnashram, or following Varnashram, you become a human being? You can go either way. I was just this morning listening to Prabhupada speaking about Daivi Sampat, Chapter 16, Bhagavad Gita, the divine and dvaniyak qualities, Daivi Sampat. So he was saying either way, you develop Daivi Sampat, the characteristics of a godly person, and you can have access to Krishna. You get access to Krishna, you automatically develop the
godly qualities.
good qualities. So in addition to what's my rasa, how do I engage in my, be a civilized human being. Control anger, lust and greed and, egoism. It's all about me. That's the Dhruva story. It's all about me. And even he was so exalted, he lost it again with his brother when his brother was killed. It was all about Dhruva, his taking revenge for his brother being killed. He lost his bearings. And, this sound vibration brought him back to his right position. But because he was a human being, he was civilized. And, so we need to be deeply rooted in the sound vibration that elevates consciousness. For us, Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, go there, do that, develop those nice qualities that are described in chapter 16 or elsewhere, the qualities of chapter 18. But we're not just quality driven, we're Krishna Bhakti driven. And we want to please Krishna, so that's why we want these qualities. We want to represent Guru and Krishna properly. We want to represent the Vaishnava to the world properly. And when there is such a person, that person is powerful. Doesn't matter what body they're in. Doesn't matter what language they've come from, what culture they've come from. Such a person is very powerful. Such a person is very powerful. They can transform the lives of others they come in contact with. They want to do that. They do that. They're agents for elevation of the world, whoever they come in contact with. Yeah. So, worry about rasa in the mature stage. It'll come. It will come. And that's part of sadhana, is to know it will come, is having that faith. It will come. Let me just live my life properly and awaken for Krishna consciousness. That's where your attention should stay there. The rasa will unfold in time.
Thanks, Maharaj.
Okay. Anyone else in the room would like to discuss something? 'Cause otherwise we'll go. Then we have. Okay.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. So, thank you for coming here. I was just appreciating the commentaries. I always like the commentaries that you read from Jiva Goswami and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakura. If I want to read it myself, I may not do it, but all these classes are very enriching and you're wonderful. Especially Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakura, I like that question-answer format where, he's like asking questions for us, seems like it, and for our understanding. And it's so beautiful and wonderful. And that is what is, sometimes it is like when you read the scriptures, sometimes you just skim through, or you don't deeply understand things, and these acharyas are having layers and layers and layers of unraveling each and every point. So that's so beautiful. So if I were to ask questions, how do I ask questions, and what type of questions should I ask when I study? Because I don't want to be like, Brahma is very great and he has so much knowledge, but he's the humble person. So he's saying, I don't want knowledge. I don't want to be, this morning he said, I think, I don't want to be a Brahmana. I don't want to be, I just need the dust. Yeah. So, and how do I ask questions the right way?
Well, two things. Read Prabhupada's books regularly, and read with the inquisitive spirit, Brahma Jigyasa, that is, I want to know. And don't jump, just continue in that receptive, I want to know mood, and you'll get filled up. Because Prabhupada was specifically empowered, and is still doing. His Bhaktivedanta purports are delivering people that have never met him, but just by reading his books, their lives are being transformed. So there's a statement in Scripture and I haven't learned the Sanskrit, but there's 5 personalities where you get the greatest benefit from those 5 personalities corresponding to faith. One of them is a doctor, but it's true. Faith in the doctor helps the effectiveness of the treatment the doctor prescribes. And the teachers, faith in the teacher, you'll learn more if there's faith in the teacher than if you don't have faith in the same teacher. It enhances the shraddha. It enhances realization. So my first part of the 2-part response to your question is read regularly with an inquisitive spirit, with faith that Prabhupada is a uniquely empowered personality. I really don't need to go elsewhere. Now I'm going elsewhere, and I've mentioned this is now 20 times. A little concern about reading other things other than just Prabhupada's writings. But I think it's good. One of the reasons I continue doing this is I think it's good that you get some exposure through one who has not grasp of Prabhupada's writings and implicit faith in Prabhupada's writings, and then you can receive those other teachings. But when you're in a way that you don't get bewildered or distracted, or attention goes away from Prabhupada, because So that's your specific question. Second part is how do I go about reading and asking the right questions while reading? From doing number 1, the second one will come. That is to say, your inquisitive spirit will be struck by this and that and the other thing. The inquisitive spirit will result in questions when you hear this and you hear that, just like Arjuna does in Bhagavad Gita. Over here you said this, and over there you're saying that. So could you please explain? Now, to him it sounds like a contradiction, but it's not. It's an apparent contradiction. He doesn't say you just contradicted yourself, Krishna. He's taking the position. It appears to be contradictory. Could you help me understand why it's not? So your understanding can deepen by inquisitive spirit. So you ask for clarification. And it's not, if you don't have somebody right there to seek clarification, you continue reading, and many times, oh, there it is. If you stay with, if it's not just a fleeting, information-oriented kind of inquisitiveness, but it's a deeper, I want to know Krishna inquisitiveness, then you'll get the answer. And those things that you're not right away getting the answer to, or patiently getting the answer to, you ask. You have your teachers, and to the best of their capacity, they'll present. Okay, let's go to online, so our online people don't feel neglected.
No questions.
No questions. Okay. Anything else in the room? Yes? I'm very surprised.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Just one, the last piece, it was somewhat clear, but still, the extreme indebtedness of atonement.
What's that?
The indebtedness to atonement, you said.
Indebtedness to atonement?
No, extreme indebtedness to atonement. Was that the last?
Extreme indebtedness to atonement.
Was that the last portion, Maharaj, that you?
No, I don't recall that at all.
Okay.
Extreme
So maybe
indebtedness to atonement.
Okay. There was something regarding the atonement. And maybe.
Last line you read of Krishna Chaturthi commentary.
Oh, okay.
Right. So that wasn't.
Krishna. You've made a mistake. you've transgressed normal dealings. Normal dealings is you give yourself to the best, and you've given yourself to Putana. Now look at these people. They've given you everything. You got to atone for that. The atonement is you dedicate yourself to them. No, he's dedicated to them because they're dedicated to him. It's just a left-wing gopi waves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's, yeah, okay. Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you.
Anything else? Vibhu Chaitanya, anything? Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
So let's